Here we go. Okay. All right. Here we are. Okay. So let us begin. I will just want to mention something that occurred to me. I don't know who mentioned this yesterday, but we learned yesterday about the case of this case of where you have a sukkah, that a place that would not be, I'm sorry, not this sukkah. It would be a place, the movoi, a place that would not be a kosher sukkah, but it only becomes a kosher sukkah on Shabbos, right? On Shabbos of Sukkot, since it's a wall, the lechi becomes a wall on Hilchas Shabbos. It could also become the wall. It becomes a kosher sukkah. So yeah, we're going to learn later on that a sukkah has to be valid for all 8 days. How is it possible to have a sukkah that's not kosher for 6 days, and then one day of the sukkahs, because it's Shabbos, it becomes now a kosher sukkah? It's somebody like jogged my thoughts there, and I didn't see a teretz for that. Could be that once everything gets overridden by this, then I don't know.
Yeah, but we see this even by Kalkelas HaShabbos. There are certain different gedarim in Keva, Arai, that Shabbos has its own definition. Things that during the week don't take on the same import can take the import. So if something is considered a lechi, a doifen for purposes of Shabbos,
I get that, but in Hilchas Sukkah, if you have a sukkah that for some reason can only stand for 3 days, the Florida engineer said that this thing can stand for 3 days, then it's not a kosher sukkah. You have to build a sukkah that could be capable of standing for 7 days, no matter how flimsy. Now, if you have a sukkah that's not valid, not kosher for 6 of the 7 days, and on Shabbos, because of a Hilchas Shabbos, it becomes kosher for that day, how is it kosher? This sukkah is invalid all 6 days. That's the point.
Yeah.
So that just a side question of yesterday. Okay, this Gemara is not, the Gemara that we're learning is not so complicated. Actually, it looks fuzzy and mathy, but it's not. It's very common. We learned yesterday that there is an opinion, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, that says the minimum size of a sukkah is 4 amas by 4 amas. That's 8 feet by 8 feet. That is the minimum size of a sukkah, right? So the Gemara says, the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan is going to make a statement, is suppose the sukkah was like a hot tub, a round circle, right? So what would be the circumference of that circle in order to validate the sukkah? You see, a regular sukkah that has 4 amas by 4 amas, what's the circumference? Obviously, of a square is 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4, 16. But suppose you have this picture over here. Basically, it's a circle that has a square inside, because the square inside would be the sukkah, right? And so you want to say that if you have the sukkah, if you have a sukkah that's round, it has to be a certain size. What would be the circumference of that? So one thing you have to know, three laws of basic geometry, 9th grade, basically. Diameter is obviously double the radius, so it's the width across a circle. To find the circumference of a circle, you just times it by 3. They call it pi, but in the Gemara they weren't as precise as we are today, so they call it 3. So if you have an amma that's, let's say, tefach, so then the circumference of the circle will be 3 tefachim, right? That's how you find the circumference of a circle. So now, if you have a square that has the 4 by 4, and then that's 4 by 4 by 4 inside a circle, then the diameter would be the hypotenuse, would be the diagonal across the square inside the circle. Now, what would that diameter be? So that's basic Pythagorean theorem, which will say if the sides of the square are 4, the diagonal across to make a triangle will be 5 3/5. Okay, 5 3/5. It's 1 3/5 more than the sides because it's going in a diagonal. So that would be the diameter of this circle. So the diameter of this circle, which is the the diagonal of the square would be 5 3/5. So what would be the minimum shear of the circumference of a circle? In other words, the minimum shear of a sukkah that's shaped as a circle would be 16 4/5, because 5 3/5 times 3, right? 5 3/5 times 3 is the subject of 16 4/5. That's all you got to remember. We're trying to get to that number of 16 4/5 as a circumference for a kosher sukkah. Comes along Rabbi Yochanan, and he says, in this case, you have a circle, a sukkah that's shaped as a circle. How many people should fit in? You see, they had no way of measuring the circumference like we have, so they would put people inside this the sukkah. And how many people inside the sukkah do you need to put in to get a proper kosher sukkah? So that's what we're reading over here. Let's read it inside, and you'll see how Rabbi Yochanan's math is doesn't seem to make sense. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, we are holding about 7 lines from the bottom of Daf Zayin Amud Sheni. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, sukkah ho'asuya kikivshon, a sukkah that's made like a pool, okay, like a round hot tub or whatever you want to call it. If you could sit inside this round circular pool for 24 people, kshera, vimla pasula, then it's not a kosher sukkah. So if 24 people can't fit all around in the circle, then it's not a kosher sukkah. So the Gemara doesn't understand, because every person is basically is an amma. So he's saying that the circumference should be 24 amas. Come on. Who does Rabbi Yochanan subscribe to? Karebi. The Amar, that you need a sukkah, kol sukkah she'ein bo arba amas al arba amas, pasula. If a sukkah is not 4 by 4 amas, it's possible. Okay. So michte, let us see. Gavra ba'am suyosif. Every human being takes up 1 amma, 2 feet, 1 amma. So basically what Rabbi Yochanan says is that the circumference of that circle should be 24 amas. But I just showed you that it should only be maximum 16 and 5 and 16, a little bit under 16.80. So that's the Gemara is going to develop this idea. First, the Gemara tells you a few laws in math. In a circle is called sheyesh be'hekei shloisha. In a circle, if you have a circumference of 3 tefachim, yesh by roichav tefach, then the diameter will be 1 tefach. So the ratio from a diameter to the circle to the circumference is basically 3 times. So diameter times 3, then you get the circumference, which, as if you remember, this formula is 2 pi r, r being radius. So 2r is basically the diameter times pi, which is 3 approximately. So then the Gemara's question is, betresa sagi. Let's have a diameter of 4, and all the circumference should be is 12. So you should only need 12 people in the not 24. It should only be 12. So now we go to Daf Ches Amud Aleph. So the Gemara says, Hani milu, that was only said be'igula. If you just have a circle, I grant you that to have a diameter, to have a circumference of 12, all you need is 12 people. That's it. I'll agree to that. And because if the diameter was 4, then all you need is 12 people around. But if you're going to make a square, so imagine a square circumscribing a circle, a square all around a circle. You would need more, because the circumference of a circle that's surrounding a circle is much more. So the Gemara says, how much more can it be? It can only be a quarter, because michte kama miruba yoise ala igel. If you have a square that's encompassing a circle, how much more is the square than the circle? Revia, a quarter. As I explained you, the middle circle over here in the square has a circumference of 12, and if you have a square on the outside of it, it's 16, 4 by 4 by 4 by 4. So, okay, so you want to say that you need a 16 circumference square. So, Beshitzasagi, all you need is 16 people, not 24. So why did Rabbi Yochanan say you have to fit 24 people in the tub? So the Gemara says another thing, and the Gemara doesn't really get it until you get to the point. Han immediately that was only said be'igul denafel begoy ribu, when the circle comes about from within the square, but we want it the opposite way. Alva ribua denafek migoy igula. We want a square inside a circle. The opposite case. So the circle is on the outside and the square is on the inside. So boyatvei, you're going to need a bigger circle, mishum marsha the karnosa, because of the extension of the corners. So the Gemara seems to say the reason why you need 24 is because, granted that the circumference of the square that's within the circle is 16, but the circumference of the circle is going to be a lot more. So the Gemara analyzed that mathematically. How much more is it going to really be? And this is what we started. Michte, let us see. Call amsa biribua, any square that is that's an amma, amsa tre chumsha ba'alach soina. Then you should know that the diagonal will be 1 amma and 2/5. So if the sides of the square is 1 amma, the diagonal across will be an amma and 2/5. That's Pythagorean theorem. So if so, let's do that. Let's extend that. If you have a 4x4 square, the diagonal will be 5 3/5. So if you do the math, 5 and which will that diagonal you see in my screen on my Gemara, that diagonal is 5 3/5, which is the diameter of the circle, the outer circle. 5 3/5, which is 5.6. 5 times 3, you get 16.8. So the Gemara is saying, so why all you need is b'shifsa nechai chumshasagi. All you need is a circumference for that circle of 17 minus the 5th, which is basically 16.8. So why did Rabbi Yochanan say you need a 24 amma circumference when 16.8 would suffice? So the Gemara says Rabbi Yochanan was loidak, was not precise. Really, you're right. 16.8 would be kosher, but Rabbi Yochanan said you should take 24. So the Gemara doesn't buy that teretz. Eimed amrinam loidak. When do you say somebody's not precise in their measurements? Purta, if he's off by a little bit, right? If you're off by 1, okay, fine, I grant you that. But tuva mi amrinam loidak, would you say that somebody's off by so much? In other words, a real kosher sukkah would be if the circle had a circumference of 16.8. Comes along Rabbi Yochanan and says you need the circumference of 24, because so 24 to 16.8 is a difference of 7 at least. And how could Rabbi Yochanan make such a mistake? So Amar Kashisha b'rei Rav Chizda Rav Ashi. So Amar Kashisha says in the name of Rav Chizda, the son of Rav Chizda, to Rav Ashi, he says, I have another idea. Mi savrit gavra ba'amsi Yosef. You're predisposed to saying that every human being takes 1 amma. So if you have 24 people, it's 24 ammas to circumference. That's not true. Tlosa gavre betarte amse yosve. You have 3 people in every 2 ammas. And so people are a lot skinnier than you think. Every 3 people could fit in 2 ammas. Basically, each person would fit into 2/3 of an amma, because if you do the math of 2 ammas divided by 3, right? 2 ammas divided by 3, every person is 0.66 of an amma, not a whole amma. Every person takes a 0.66 of an amma. Now, let's do the math. So Rabbi Yochanan said you put 24 people into the tub, right? That's the picture. Put 24 people into this round pool. And each person takes up 0.66 of an amma. 0.66 times 24. What's the math you're going to get? 16. So Rabbi Yochanan saying they put 24 people in the tub and you'll get 16 amma circumference. And that's, close enough to 16.8. That's what he says. Kama hava. How much hamaluhu? If you take 0.66 times 24, shitzer, you'll have a circumference of 16. So the Gemara says, Anan shifsa nechei chumsha be'inim. But in order to make a kosher sukkah, you really need 16.8. And Rabbi Yochanan saying just with a 16 circumference, it would be kosher. So the Gemara says, Loidak, Rabbi Yochanan was not precise. He said it's kosher already at 16, but really you're supposed to have 16.8 circumference. So the Gemara says, wait a second, hold it. When do you say somebody's not precise? L'chumra, to be more strict. If something is kosher at 16.8, you tell me you have to have 17 or 18. I agree to that. But l'kula mi amrina loidak, would you say to go lenient, to say something is kosher when it's not supposed to be kosher, and you say, oh, he wasn't precise? That means Rabbi Yochanan is saying it's kosher already at 16, but that's not correct. In order for it to be kosher, as we started and we kept repeating, is you need a 16.8 circumference of that circle, right? Because you're putting a square, a 4x4 square in there. So this totally doesn't make sense. Well, again, back to the question of why did Rabbi Yochanan request that in order to make a sukkah kosher, it has to have 24 people in the tub itself? Either way, it doesn't make sense. Whether you call a person, a human being takes up 1 amma, it wouldn't make sense. And even if you say a human being takes up 0.66 of an amma, it wouldn't make sense. Amalei, so what's the answer? How do we explain Rabbi Yochanan? Amalei Rabasi Rabashi la'olam really gavra ba'am Yosef. Every human being takes up 1 amma. So you have 24 circumference? No. Rabbi Yochanan makoim gavra like a choshev. He's not talking about the human beings. In other words, what Rabbi Yochanan is looking is this picture. He put the human beings on the outside of the circle. So you have 2 circles. One circle is the human beings sitting all around the pool on the outside. So if the human beings are on the outside of the circle, that means the circumference of the outside circle is 24. So how much would be the circumference of the inner circle? Well, it's very simple, because the outer circle has, if the circumference of the outer circle where the human beings are sitting has a 24 circumference, that means the diameter is 8, right? Because 24 divided by 3 is 8. But if you discount each person takes up an amma, so you minus 1 amma on each side. So then you have the diameter of the inner circle as 6. And therefore the circumference of the pool will be 18. And therefore Rabbi Yochanan said, in order to make a kosher sukkah, you should have 24 people sitting around the pool. Therefore, the circumference of the sukkah itself, which is on the inside, would be a circumference of 18, because the diameter will be 6. And therefore, the circumference is 18. Really, to make it kosher, you need 16.8. But Rabbi Yochanan was loidak, he wasn't precise in telling you, make sure it's at least 18. And that's how the Gemara resolves it. Really, a person sits by and takes up an amma space. Rabbi Yochanan makom ava loika choshev. He's not talking about the humans inside. The humans are not counted as part of the diameter. So kama havalu, how much are you going to have? I'm going to say it. You're going to have a diameter of 6 and a circumference now of 18. Really, so the Gemara says, wait a minute, if you're just going to have a circumference of 18, that's still too much. It should be enough with 17 minus a fifth, which is basically 16.8. So why did Rabbi Yochanan require you to have a circumference of 18? I knew the loidak. That's what Rabbi Yochanan wasn't precise. He said to go a little stricter, have a little bigger circle in order to make a kosher sukkah. Interesting how the Gemara didn't have measurements. They didn't have a measuring stick or something like that. So they measured a circle by having a guys from shul come over to his house, and they all sat around this pool, and then they decided it's kosher enough. So that was one teretz. Comes along, the Gemara says something very strange, and that's not mathematically correct, and the Gemara pulls it away. There were Rabbanan de Caesarea. There were Rabbanan that lived in Caesarea. You could go, it's a tourist spot in Israel, not far from Tel Aviv, Caesarea, and there were great Rabbanan. Va'amrilei, and others say it was the Dayani de Caesarea. The Dayanim of Caesarea wanted to resolve this in a way. Amri, they said, Igula denafid megoy rebua river. They'll grant you a circle, the circle that's within the square Okay, the square is bigger than the circle, river, a quarter. That we saw that. If the circle has a circumference of 12, then the square would have a circumference of 16 because the square is on the outside of the circle. That's what we saw on the top. Okay, that holds up mathematically. We go to Daf Tesomet Sheni. Ribua the Nafik Bigai Igula Palga. They say that if you're going to put a square inside a circle, right? A square inside a circle, then the circle will be half more than the square. So if you put a square of 16 of a square, a 4x4 square in a circle, so the square will have a circumference of 16. So they think mathematically that the circle that circumscribes that square will have a circumference of 24, half more than the circumference of the square. If the circumference of the square is 16, half of 16 is 8. So that will be the circumference of the circle. That's their math. So the Gemara says, V'loihi, that is totally incorrect. We see, if we do it mathematically, it's not true. We said, if the circumference if we said that the circumference of the square would be 16, then the circle will be 16/4, not 24. I mean, it'll be 16.8, not 24. I don't know how they came up with this Rabbanan of Caesarea, and it's really troubling to the Rishonim how the rabbis of Caesarea could say something that totally doesn't make mathematically sense. So this ends the sugya. So let's recap. Rabbi Yochanan made a statement. If you have a sukkah that is the size of a circle, then you have to have 24 people. If 24 people to go, and the way the Gemara learns in the end, to go around the sukkah, to be sitting around the sukkah, then that circle is a kosher for a sukkah. Because to make a kosher circle sukkah, it has to have a circumference of 18, and then you can put tzchach over here, and that will be fine. And how do you measure a circle to have 18? You put 24 people around the circle, around the pool, and if you put 24 people around, each person takes up an amma, then you know that the pool itself, the circle itself, is 18 circumference. Really, 16.8 would be enough, as we've learned. But Rabbi Yochanan said have their 18 circumference. New Gemara. Amar Rabbi Levi. Rabbi Levi said, Mishum Rameir, in the name of Rameir, Shtei Sukkos Shel Yotzrim Zu Lefnim Zu. There was a let us bring the picture up. Here we go. Let me just bring the picture up. You have a guy who has, where did I put it? Okay, here it is. Here's the picture. You have a sukkos yotzrim, means a person who makes pottery. So he has a front sukkah that he, holds he sells things from, and in the back is where he does his work. Sometimes he sleeps there at night. It's not his permanent home. He has another home somewhere. But when he's in the office late, so to speak, he will sit into the shop that's in the back of the part that's in the back. So the Gemara says like this: You have the two sukkahs of the yotzrim, of the potteries. One is within each other. Hapnimi is the most inner sukkah. Ain't a sukkah. It cannot be counted for a sukkah. And the reason is because a sukkah, even if you don't have to build it l'shem for the mitzvah, but it has to be built as a hut used for shade. But this, when it was built, it's actually used as a living quarters, right? It's used as a living quarters, and therefore it's not considered a sukkah. You cannot make it into a sukkah, and therefore it's obligated to put a mezuzah on the inner part, the inner sukkah. The sukkah, the chitzoina is considered a sukkah, the outer one, because it's temporarily. You don't sleep there all year, and therefore it could be counted as a sukkah because it's just overhead protection from the sun. And because it's a sukkah, you could use it for the mitzvah. Upatura min mezuzah, it's potter from mezuzah. So the Gemara asks the question: Va'amai. Why is it so? Why is the outer one not obligated in a mezuzah? To have a chitzoyne kebeshar panimis. Let the outer one be like the entrance door for the inner sukkah, for the inner chamber. The outer door should be the inner chamber, but it's chayav b'mezuzah, and it should be obligated in the mezuzah. In other words, very often you'll have, I'm showing the picture over here by the Pirish Chai, an outer chamber that leads into a house, right? Like a hallway that leads into a house. So of course the hallway needs a mezuzah because it's a beit sha'ar that leads into the living quarters. So even though you don't sleep in the outer sukkah because that's where you're selling stuff, right? The question is, why doesn't the outer one require a mezuzah? Because it's like the entrance alleyway into the inner one. So the Gemara is going to answer very simply, because the inner one is only chayiv midrabanan a sukkah, because mezuzah, because that's not really where he lives. It's actually very flimsy. It's like a schach on top. He sleeps there sometimes, so it's only chayiv mezuzah midrabanan. So therefore, an outer chamber for a drabanan type of structure does not require a mezuzah. For the Gemara, because that's not his home. That's not his permanent home. He has a home somewhere else. And therefore, the inner chamber, the inner sukkah, is not chayiv mezuzah midaraisa. It's only chayiv midrabanan. And so, therefore, the outer chamber is not required in mezuzah at all. New Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught.
Bernard, it's a quick question. So if someone has, let's say, another home that basically he's not there most of the years, like a summer house, he's only there a couple of weeks, a year, or let's say a month, does he need to have a mezuzah there if he's there?
Because we're talking about over here structures that are not built like a house. They're built like a sukkah. And in the Middle East, it doesn't rain. So you actually could sleep there if you're staying late at the office, if he was a potterer.
I see. So it's not the frequency. It's more like the structure of the house itself.
Right. So the structure, therefore, it's only a temporary structure.
I got it.
There's a new company called Boxable. And what's this? Elon Musk, which basically they bring the house to you wherever you want to build it on a truck. And in 45 minutes, they could open up the house and you have a regular home. It's fascinating. It's a new technology that it's foldable. It's built with great materials, and they can put it together within 45 minutes. And they're rolling it out. It's a brand new. I'll send you a link to it.
Wow!
But it's interesting, and you have all the amenities of a regular house.
And what about the pipes and the sewer? Can they hook all up in 45 minutes?
45 minutes.
Wow.
45 minutes. They're doing it in California.
I'm not surprised with Elon Musk. If you could send someone to Mars, he could do that, right?
He actually, they say he lives in one. Right.
Sure, why not?
Right.
He's advertising his wares, his goods.
That's right. That's right.
Good for him.
Billions in orders already. So I'll show you. You got to see this thing. And you know what? In the country, they're gonna start building homes like this. Can you imagine? You don't have to wait years till your bungalow is built, or you buy in Vacation Village. You can actually have this thing done in 45 minutes.
Amazing.
Anyway,
but do you think these are quality houses?
Very.
Really?
You got. I'll send you the link.
I'd appreciate that. Yeah.
I'll put it on the. You take a look.
I just looked at it. It's amazing.
It's amazing technology.
It's BOXABL.
BL. Yeah.
It's incredible.
Baruch, can I ask you a shaila about mezuzahs? Maybe you can answer it for me.
Yeah.
If you have a minute. Do you?
Yeah, I would just want to finish the daf. So you want to finish the daf first, and we'll.
Okay, finish the daf first, and I'll ask you. I'll send you an email with the shaila then.
Okay, sure. We're just almost by the finishing of the daf, and then
we'll finish it right ahead.
Next fun of it. Okay, Turner Rabbanim. Rabbis taught 4 halachas. Ganbach. It sounds like thief, but anyway, it's a abbreviation. Sukkahs goyim. If goyim built the sukkah, okay, they're not obligated to sukkah. They built you the sukkah. Sukkahs noshim. If women built the sukkah. Sukkahs behema, or was built for animal to provide shade for animals. Sukkahs kusim. These are the kuthiims, which we're going to learn that they're like goyim. You think this is Sancheriv, who brought them to take over the place of the 10 tribes. When he exiled the 10 tribes, he put these people, Kuthims, in their place. And so the Kuthims committed to become Jews, but then we found that they weren't really so committed to becoming Jews. So they're called Gerei Arayas, basically not really Gerim. So they're Goyim. They built these sukkahs, or sukkah mikol mokum, or no matter how you build the sukkah, kshera, it's kosher. Because we hold that you don't have to build it l'shem mitzvah sukkah. If you build it as a hut with shade, that's kosher. Uvavad should take musuchseches kilchosa. Make sure it has the schach halachically. So what does it mean? Halachic schach. Of course, so we're not going to give it any leniencies that a regular sukkah doesn't have. My kilchosa, Rav Chizdev, hu asol etzel sukkah, that he made it for shade. That the goy made it that he's going to use it for shade, not that it's there to put bicycles in there, let's say, or to put stuff in there. He made it for people to get protection from the sun. That's a key word. The idea is that it was made to provide protection from the sun for your animals or whoever. If the woman's going to use it, no matter who's going to use it, that's the key of the sukkah. But it doesn't have to be made for the mitzvah of the sukkah. And then the Gemara asks, Mikol mokum latuyamai. He said, sukkah mikol mokum, any type of sukkah is kosher. What does that mean? What does that include? Latuye sukkahs rakbash. The following sukkahs are also kosher. The Tanu Rabbanim, sukkahs rakbash. The following sukkahs, this has abbreviation. The following 4 sukkahs are also kosher. Sukkahs royim. If a shepherd builds a sukkah and he's mobile, so he builds a sukkah to watch, to stay there for a few days while his sheep are grazing, or sukkahs kayotzim, or people who are just watching fruit dry. They work in the field, so they have a little sukkah, a hut. Sukkahs burganin, or people who are watchmen of the city, they have a hut where they stay overnight. Sukkahs shemei peres, or people who are just guarding fields that have expensive fruit. Sukkah mikol mokum kashera, or sukkah, anyway, wherever it was built is kosher. Now, these are Jewish people who are building the sukkahs, but the idea is that it's temporary. Unlike the other sukkahs that we're talking about, these sukkahs are going to be dismantled. They were built to be dismantled when you don't need it anymore, when it's not the season, or when the shepherd moves on. And this price has the same idea. It has to be schach according to the law. So what does it mean according to the law? It has to be made that it was put up to provide shade, not to store tools in there, but it was made so that somebody could be in there, or an animal, or anybody, that and protects himself from the sun. That's why it makes a sukkah. So mikol mokum latu yamai. In this price, it says mikol mokoim. So what is that including? A sukkah, any type of sukkah. The second brisa. So that will be, this price will say latu sukkahs gambach. That will tell you that the sukkahs gambach are also kosher. The first 4 that we mentioned are also kosher. So basically, you have 2 brises. Each brisa says that any type, that it gives you a halacha, and then it tells you that any type of sukkah is kosher, which means that the other list is also kosher. So, for example, Gambach said Gambach is kosher, and it hints that also Rakbach will be kosher. And the second brisa says Rakbach will be kosher, but also it hints that also Gambach will be kosher. So why did one think that one is less of a chiddush than the other, and less of a novelty? Hai Tana de Gambach, the one that said Gambach is kosher, Ali Mele Gambach. It's much better to say that Gambach is kosher. Why? Because Mishum de Kviye. Because although it's built by Goyim, but they were built to last for a long time. They were built by Kutim or Noshim or anybody, but still, these are meant to last for a long time. That's why it's kosher. But then he says that you could also make the rakbash kosher, the royim, all those ones are also kosher, even though they're not built to last. They're built to be dismantled. The loikivia, that it's not meant to last. It's meant to be dismantled. And the opposite Tana, the high Tana, the rakbash alimele rakbash. He liked the one that the second brisa that said rakbash are the better types of sukkah. Why? Because the B'nai Chiyuvin in it. Because at the end of the day, they were built by Jews. They were built by Jewish shepherds or Jewish watchmen. So they're built by Jews. So that's kosher. And then he says, but not only that is kosher, I'm going to tell you something else. That he tells you Gambach is also kosher, even though the lav b'nei chiyuvin inu, even though it's not built by people who are obligated in a sukkah. So therefore, you learned 8 types of sukkahs are kosher: Gambach and Rakbash. One is built by people who are not obligated for a sukkah, and the Rakbash are built by people that are going to dismantle it very shortly. But the bottom line is, the most important point is that it has to be built to provide shade. If it's built for another reason, to protect tools or something like that, then it's not kosher. And that ends the daf.
We see that from yesterday's daf. I think it was the day before, when you had a lot of the Tanaim were very hooked on the idea that it has to be something of a permanency. Right. And it seems to be kind of like even continuing that thought that there's a machlokas of Tanaim that the permanency seems to be very important.
Right. But in the end of the day, they make it kosher anyway. It's like
right. Exactly.
They make it kosher anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
And because of Dira Sarai.
Right.
Right.
I want to point out that even though Rabbi Yochanan, we started the whole day with Rabbi Yochanan, who has this sukkah that's a pool, right? But he says it has to be 4 amos by 4 amos, right? But there is an opinion that we learned at the end of yesterday's daf. Acherim said that if it's sukkah hasuya keshoivach, if it's made like with round, pasula v'she'ein lo zavis, because it has no corners. So there is an opinion, Rabbi Meir, who also holds that a sukkah has to be permanent. It has to look like a house. So I guess Rabbi Meir never went to California, but he says that if it's a circle, it's no good. Rabbi Yochanan said no. It could be a circle, but it has to be permanent, like 8 feet by 8 feet.
Right. Yep. Okay.
Where did you leave off? Where did you leave off?
With Daf Yud on top of the page. We just finished by the Mishnah. So it's
have a good Shabbos.
You went on to Yud. Okay.
Test. I didn't go to the test. Starts off with a Mishnah. Sukkah Yeshana. Top of
have a
the
good
page.
Shabbos. So when are we learning next?
Oh, I don't know. We could learn Sunday. So I guess
Sunday.
Well, we could. I guess we learn
Monday.
Monday. Okay.
Monday.
Have a good Shabbos. Have an easy fast, everyone.
I say have a fleischiger sukkahs.
Yeah.
Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos, Baruch.
Shabbos.
Okay, Mayor, if you want to email, I'll respond.
Not a problem. Thank you, Baruch. Have a
Okay.
great Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Sei gesund.
A good yontif, as they say.
A good yontif. Sei gesund.
Yeah.